I was on a Zoom call with Secretary of our board, Lynn Smith, and she asked me what I was speaking about today, and I said, well, Father's Day, of course, and she said, well, are you going to say anything about Juneteenth? And I did a mental forehead slap, and she said, well, can you work it into the sermon? And I thought to myself, no. So I decided to carve it out as a separate observance. So let me tell you, if you don't know about Juneteenth, I did not know about it like all my life or anything, just fairly recently in my ministry in Ormond Beach. And so Juneteenth is now in its third year as a federal holiday. It's been celebrated by African Americans for well over 100 years. The occasion arises from the date June 19th, 1865, which was when Union General George Granger arrived at the port city of Galveston, Texas, with troops to enforce the 1862 Emancipation Proclamation, but of course that resulted in the Civil War. But Texas at the time was remote and isolated, and it took a while before the official, after General Lee surrendered the Confederacy in April of 1865. It took some time for Union military to go into these places and decree free the enslaved peoples there. So a year after General Granger arrived and freed the enslaved people there, the Black freedmen of Texas organized a jubilee commemorating the day their enslavement was officially abolished. Now, Texas was the last state in which slavery existed, but it was the first state to adopt Juneteenth as the official state holiday in 1980. And by the time it became a federal holiday on June 17th, 2021, most states had officially recognized Juneteenth as an observance, but didn't make it an official paid holiday for state employees. Most of them came around to that in 2021, and the last states to adopt Juneteenth as a paid state holiday were Connecticut, Minnesota, and Tennessee this year. So I wish to hold up and celebrate it as a federal holiday because now a piece of our African American history is indelibly woven into the fabric of our society. And most African Americans will be celebrating tomorrow. Our own Deborah Weiss is on the planning board for tomorrow's events in Hughes Park. Now, some of you may know Deborah Weiss. She's a member of the congregation, but she's had to return to New York City to live the past couple of years for personal reasons. But she still comes down here occasionally, and this is one occasion. So she couldn't be here this morning, but she wanted to share these words from the Pearl City's Juneteenth celebration. Juneteenth is about freedom, freedom from slavery, freedom from oppression, freedom from racism, sexism, and ageism. While the holiday is bittersweet, the Pearl City celebration is focusing on the positive, on how far African Americans have come rather than on how much they have suffered. We each can make a choice to see our glass half full or half empty. The Juneteenth Pearl City community chooses to see the glass as half full and growing fuller. In the spirit of helping those who are living on limited means, donations of gently used clothes are welcome. So tomorrow, I'm going to pick up Rick Troiano, and we're going to go to Hughes Park. The festivities start at noon. Deborah's going to be talking at the kickoff, and she says there's going to be lots of activities going on, a free lunch, and a visit to Pearl City's community garden, which she was involved in. And she says in the afternoon there will be a sweet potato pie bake-off with lots of delicious samples. So she says she'll be making love rocks with kids at the craft table, and she hopes that folks from the fellowship will join the fun in Hughes Park. I can take 2 additional passengers if you're interested, maybe pick you up here at the fellowship. But really, all of us in our society and our fellowship should join in the celebration of freedom. We should be thankful because there's no way that any of us are free while even one of our fellow human beings is denied freedom and agency in their own lives. Now, I wanted to provide a musical response to this, to close this observance. And I thought about hymn number 149, Lift Every Voice and Sing, which is an African-American national anthem. But as most of us here don't have that ancestry nor that lived experience, I invite us to sing instead hymn number 1028. Fire of Commitment was written by the Reverend Mary Catherine Mourn. She was an extraordinary minister in Fairfax, Virginia, and now she's the president of the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee. So she wrote the hymn with Jason Shelton, and I think of it as our UU anthem, our Unitarian Universalist anthem, which calls us to be courageous allies to the vulnerable among us and to be free in seeking, to be on fire in seeking justice and equity in our living. So if you arise in body or spirit and turn to number 1028, Fire of Commitment. There is a little bit of an introduction, right? And then I want you to belt it out.
From the dreams of youthful vision
Thank you so much. You may be seated. Happy Father's Day to all biological fathers, adoptive fathers, stepfathers, grandfathers, great-grandfathers, and anyone who has been a father figure in a child's life. If happy applies to your day, then enjoy your necktie or coffee mug or sleeve of golf balls. If happy does not apply, then may you find a measure of comfort in this hour. If I am to speak my truth in this pulpit, then allow me to confess a bit of discomfort with what I think of as the Hallmark homage. It's a Hallmark card homage to good old mother and father. Now, I know that these holidays have other roots, but like everything, well, not everything, like a lot of things in our lives, traditions become co-opted in a sense, in a consumerist way. And that's how I've come to think of it. In my adult years, I rarely lived in proximity to my parents, and I would fret over, oh, I gotta get them a card, I gotta get it mailed to arrive on time. And to tell the truth, I could never send my parents one of those mushy, sentimental cards, because that's not who my mother and father were to me. To me, they were complicated, distant, and sometimes unfathomable. And now, come full circle, my own daughters fret just the same over me on Mother's Day. Oh, I didn't get it in the mail on time. And I say, don't worry about it. Giving birth to you does not require you to make an idol of me. Now, I know there are some good parents out there who deserve honoring. You all deserve honoring, really. But few of us parents are without fault. Ward cleavers don't exist in the real world. He's a television trope that, in the words of Ryan Uri, says, casts patriarchy in a benevolent light. The harm in this is the unrealistic expectation that being a good father means sporting an unrumpled tie and sweater and never losing your temper. Well, you all know as well as I do that parenthood can be messy, chaotic, exhausting, heartbreaking, much more often than it's tidy, organized, uplifting, and joyful. And when it is, there's nobody is witness to it, right? I was reminded of this last Thursday. For a few weeks, Anthony Huber has been running a children's theater camp here, which culminated into a performance this past Thursday night of The Lion King. Well, I was curious, and I wanted to be supportive of Anthony, who's a great guy, so I attended. I sat in the back row as parents, siblings, relatives, and friends of the school-age performers filled the sanctuary. As I observed them, it occurred to me that most of the parents in the audience could be my children. I don't have any grandchildren yet, but they could be my children. And it struck me suddenly what a different experience from my own they must be having raising their children through a pandemic, which adds so much more challenge to the parenting experience that can be trying at best on some days. Imagine if those dads thought that they needed to be Ward Cleaver. Now, I doubt that they would be familiar at that age, be familiar with that trope, yet I'm sure that all dads of all ages have probably been put up to some ideal. And that thought saddens me. My parents were far from ideal, yet I still love them. And as I came into my own as an adult and a parent, I gained insight into their challenges. I had no idea how hard it would be to parent. So if it's okay with you, I want to dispense with the idolizing and the idealizing rhetoric of the Hallmark homage and turn to a few real life reflections of fatherhood. The first of these three readings comes from a Unitarian Universalist layperson, Jessica Rockers, who gives her sweet and tender reflections for a Father's Day service. Yet it asks some questions. So begins her reading. Every Sunday morning, growing up, my father would take us to Mass at St. Peter's Catholic Church. I loved the hymns and the smells and the bells, as they say, but the sermons were kind of a bore. Really? So I can't imagine that. So I would occupy myself by counting the cuts and scrapes and bruises on my father's hands. That sounds ominous. So let me repeat that. She says, I was bored of the sermons, so she'd occupy herself by counting the cuts and scrapes and bruises on her father's hand. She said, my dad was an electrician and a farmer, working with his hands from before the sun came up until long after it went down. Every week, I would take his large hand in my little ones, turning them over, examining, discovering new bruises, and keeping track of the healing of old ones. I would count the wounds and whisper the tally in his ear. He loved that he let me hold and investigate his hands in this way, snuggled up next to him in the pew, in the quiet of the church with just the priest's voice in the background. Having two jobs that demanded his attention, my dad didn't always have time for such intimacies, except on Sunday morning. And I took pride in those wounds, Jessica said. It was evident of how hard my dad worked to take care of his family. He was a man who was often uncomfortable with expressing affection, but I could see in those hands how much he loved me. Was my dad a good dad? Was he there for me when I needed him? Did he protect and provide for me? Did he care about me? When I ask myself those questions, Jessica says, I think of his hands. My own father had a military career and was absent from my life in long stretches. I know from my perspective as a child how much I missed my dad. He was tall and authoritative, and he was my protector. But Reverend George Tiger, UU chaplain, he's a major in the US Army, shares what it is to be a father a half a world away from his young son. Tiger says, my son has sent me a Build-A-Bear dressed in camouflage. It came with a note in my 8-year-old's handwriting. Press left paw for I love you and I miss you. Sure enough, when I press the left paw, my son's voice announces, I love you and I miss you. I set the bear on my green Army field desk. The bear arrived when I was weary of work and devotion to duty. Unlike the typical day stateside that comes with a beginning of, dark 30 and ends at 1700, 5 o'clock. The days on deployment are not so easily demarcated. There is no home to go to, only a cot in a tent just yards away from where you work. I walk home every night to a tiny room 7 by 9 feet, and with a single light, no one is there waiting for me. No one welcomes me at the end of my day. Work continually expands to fill whatever space is available. Nights alone can drag on. Phone calls home are too short and too distant. He is in Afghanistan at this time. The Tiger goes on to say that for times when loneliness and isolation become overwhelming, each person must focus on what truly matters. His fellow chaplains would often point soldiers to scripture for meaning, but Tiger counseled his soldiers to decide for themselves what truly has meaning for them. What matters most when times are difficult? That's different for each person. And while it might be a holy book, a creed, a theology, each person must choose. No one can choose for you. So Tiger closes his story with this. There are some values honored by all faith traditions: compassion in the face of suffering, love in the face of hatred, hope in the face of fear. But on some long, lonely nights, what really matters is closer to our hearts than any of these eternal values. Right now, what matters for me is a stuffed bear dressed in camouflage and a voice that says, "I love you and I miss you." The last of these readings reflects the both and of being a kid and having your own kids. Kids that you would lay down your life for, while at the same time resisting the urge to strangle them for their adolescent insolence. A friend of mine, the mother of 2 unruly teens, this is a long time ago, the mother of 2 unruly teens, framed and prominently displayed for her son's viewing this sentiment: "You should leave home now while you still know everything." Exactly. Who hasn't had that experience? With that, I give you a poem by a colleague. You may know him, the Reverend J. Wolin. He begins, "Forgive me, dear Father, for all the trouble I caused, the missed curfews, the missed classes, your unfulfilled dreams for me. Forgive me, my dear Father, but your dreams are not my dreams. Forgive me, dear Father, and I will forgive you for missed moments that you sacrificed so that one day I could follow my dreams. Now, forgive me, my son, for whatever errors I have made. Forgive me, my son, for what I did not know that I sacrificed so that one day you could follow your dreams. May all our failings from generation to generation lead one day to wisdom. But until then, we will always have love. We will always have love. Maybe that is wisdom enough. I close this Father's Day homily with the hope that we all resist the notion that parenting has anything to do with perfection. There are no ideals. Embrace the idea that most fathers and mothers do the best they can with what they bring to parenting, and sometimes it's complicated. And I echo Jay Wallen's words that as long as we have love, it will be enough. May peace and love be with you all on this Father's Day. Each week, following the sermon